Kia ora again. Yes, so thanks for that introduction again. Greg, that's great. Thanks so much. So I'm going to talk about basically the Pacific Media Centre, where we run projects around the Asia Pacific region every year, and I'll tell you a bit about that in detail shortly. But also I run the postgraduate paper in second semester called Asia Pacific Journalism. And doing that paper is very much a key thing about being able to do the projects. Now, as I'm going to be mostly talking about international journalism, but I think there's a truism that involves journalism generally, is that journalism's really what somebody doesn't want you to publish or broadcast and so on. Everything else is advertising. And as part of my talk, I'm going to tell you about some of the perils and pitfalls of doing international journalism. It does apply to all journalism, but particularly in the Pacific, because we're always working in zones that can be dangerous, risky, culturally challenging, and so on. So I've got a slide up here showing at the moment who is Pia Ranada, and I wonder if anybody can enlighten us. Pia Ranada. She's a household name at the moment. A journalism celebrity. We don't like to be in the news ourselves as journalists, but she is one at the moment. So nobody heard of Pia Ranada. This is not Pia Ranada on the screen, actually. It's a bodyguard at the Malacanang. So I'm giving you a couple of clues here to sort of narrow it down. Does anyone know what the Malacanang is? Presidential palace in Manila. Who is the president of the Philippines? Anybody? President of the Philippines. He was in New Zealand a couple of years ago, and we had a really exclusive story done by one of our graduates here out of this program. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Who is the president of the Philippines? Notorious. Worse than Trump. Absolutely notorious. He used to be, basically, Rodrigo Duterte is his name. And he used to be the mayor of Davao in the southern island of Mindanao in the Philippines. And he's notorious because he uses basically kill squads to wipe out people he doesn't like. And he's conducting a war on drugs in the Philippines, has been since he was elected in 2016. And there are estimates between 7,000 people and 14,000 people dead in the Philippines as a result of his policies. So we're getting a bit closer to what my question here. This is a bit closer. DT stands for, anybody might to, so Duterte, I've given you a clue already here. Duterte, trolls. This is one of the big problems that for journalism, I think these days, is if you become unpopular as a journalist, the trolls. Fortunately, it's not quite so bad in New Zealand, but it's really a big problem in many other countries at the moment. Indonesia, for example, the Philippines. Any journalist that writes stories is going to be unpopular and so on, becomes a target of the trolls for very vicious sort of attacks and so on. So this is, I'll just come back there again, so I didn't say, so this on the right there is Pia Ranada. She is a young journalist, who's a top political journalist for a website called Rappler. The logo on the bottom right there, Rappler, which has been a phenomenal success, has several million in the audience and so on. Started by Maria Ressa, who was a journalist working for CNN. And she left CNN and started off Rappler and has both sites in the Philippines and in Indonesia. We work quite closely on the course and with the Pacific Media Centre with Rappler. Very stimulating website. But anyway, Pia, just a couple of weeks ago, was banned from the presidential palace by President Duterte, and he's gunning for her. And I'm just going to show you a little clip here. Actually taken at the palace shortly after she was barred and thrown out of the presidential palace. Sorry, go back again.
A Malacanang official says President Rodrigo Duterte himself ordered that Rappler reporter Pia Ranada be barred from entering Malacanang Palace. The presidential security group on Tuesday morning stopped Ranada from entering the new executive building in the Malacanang compound. After calls were made, the PSG informed Ranada she could enter the NEB but not the palace itself. No reasons were given for this. Internal House Affairs Chief Robie says he was instructed last night by the president to tell the PSG to bar Ranada. GMA News also quotes Avancenia as saying the ban includes Rappler CEO and executive editor Maria Ressa.
Okay, just a message from Pia. This has been going around the social media in the last few days because she's been targeted just about every day for the last 2 weeks by the president and his goons and so on. So I get a lot of messages asking me how I feel when Duterte puts me on the spot during press conferences. Trolls seem to want to make it appear that Duterte humiliated me. I feel the opposite. The more Duterte bullies me and other reporters, the more insecure and desperate he looks. People might not believe it, but I'm honestly amused when he berates me. I'm irritated, though, when he doesn't seem to understand or refuses to understand my questions or ignores them altogether. So I speak up through my articles and journalism in the hope that readers will use their judgment based on facts and reason instead of propaganda. Now I have to say that something like about 93% of the population of the Philippines actually support Duterte. And I've been following the politics in the Philippines for quite a number of years, and as I say, Duterte is far worse than Trump, and yet doesn't have a very high profile here, even though he's been to New Zealand. And I'm just going to move on to that because this was quite a celebrated case involving one of our graduates, Corazon Miller. She got an exclusive interview with Duterte when he was here in November 2016. And there was one reason, particularly, why she got this exclusive interview. And that is because she is a fluent Tagalog speaker. She's born in New Zealand, but her mother was from the Philippines. And her mother wisely taught her to speak Tagalog as well as English, and she also speaks Spanish now as well. She's a journalist on the Herald, but she's moving on to the UK very shortly. At the time that she did this exclusive interview, she was on the Herald, and she tried her luck. She had heard that Duterte was speaking at a public meeting in Auckland while he was here. He wasn't actually on a state visit. He was just travelling back to the Philippines from a state visit in South America and a couple of countries. But he wanted to meet his troll friends in Auckland, quite a lot of them. And so Corazon actually heard about this, and so she fronted up, turned up there, and she's quite tall and quite striking. I'll show you a picture of her in a moment. And she just spoke in Tagalog to him. Duterte is renowned as a womanizer. He sort of takes a lot of notice of any woman who's very, very attractive and so on. And so he immediately perked up and he agreed to do an interview with her. Very sleazy character. He actually asked her if she was married, etc., etc. But anyway, she got this exclusive story. Now you see the byline at the bottom, Corazon Miller. The time that this was published, it didn't have a byline. And I contacted Corey and I said, why? Why didn't you put the byline on? The trolls. She was really, really scared of the trolls, even in New Zealand, because she knew that once her name was there, that she would be targeted, which she was, of course. But anyway, I got her to agree that we would publish her article a couple of days later on Asia Pacific Report, which is another publication coming out of the journalism program. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But we got her to agree that we would put a byline on. You don't see the byline there because it's a bit further down on the page. But she then subsequently did a story in the Weekend Herald how she outed herself as the journalist writing this story. I personally believe it's an award-winning article, a series of articles, the two as a package, because only one journalist in the country could have got that exclusive interview with her. She didn't win an award. She was up against the particular category in the Canon Awards. She was up against journalists who'd been doing investigations for a number of weeks. So it's certainly not a level playing field. But I think it's one of the best pieces of journalism, certainly international journalism, done in New Zealand in recent years. Now I've got another question here. What is the Filipino diaspora? Why do we care? So what is the Filipino diaspora in New Zealand? Anybody got an idea of what the community is here? How many? How many Filipinos are in New Zealand? Filipino Kiwis or more recent arrivals? Because the first wave of Filipino migrants here was in about 1981 or so. Anybody stab a guess? Any guess?
2,500.
One? 25,000. Bit over half, but it's 40,000. 40,000. So 40,000. But you wouldn't think so, would you? Looking at the Herald or looking at other mainstream media. And I think this is an issue. I'm not going to get into this now because I don't really have time about that. But many of our communities in New Zealand, particularly in Auckland, we have such a diverse community, and yet our mainstream media simply doesn't reflect those communities. So it's a challenge for us, and I think a challenge for us on our journalism program about how well we cover these things. So I mentioned the course that I teach, Asia Pacific Journalism. I've just thrown this picture up here because these are a couple of students, 2016, they were in Fiji. They were from the course, and they were over to cover events as one of the projects that we do, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. But I wanted to share with you one of the stories that came out from that assignment for a couple of weeks, mid-semester break, and this was by Nick Pedersen. Now, he did a story about climate change, and this was shortly before Paris, COP21, and it was a groundbreaking piece of journalism. So I'd just like to share that with you because he arrived without very little background about Bainimarama, the president of Fiji, doing an initiative and setting up this new organisation called the Pacific Development Foundation. And he managed to get quite a number of leaders from around the Pacific together at this conference and did a nice little piece around that.
Smiling faces on stage at the Grand Pacific Hotel on Friday. One after another, 7 leaders from the Pacific Island nations had just signed the first charter on climate change under the wings of the Pacific Islands Development Forum. The so-called Suva Declaration is a list of demands and expressions of concerns that the Pacific Islands in 3 months' time will take to COP21 in Paris.
Well, I like it very much because we put all our thoughts, all what we want to, present to the COP21 in Paris.
The declaration that is going to be issued today have our full support.
We're very happy with what we signed. We are hopeful that it will carry on to the other forums that we need to attend between now and Paris. But it is a very strong statement of Pacific sentiment on what must be done with climate change.
I think most of the views that are expressed are views that we also share, and it's important that we went to COP21 with one voice, and I think that's the whole objective of this forum, and I think we have achieved it.
But no one was probably more proud than the host of the event, Fiji Prime Minister Bainimarama.
The Suva Declaration is going to be an historic document, moment in which the Pacific came together as one.
The nations came together and signed the declaration after 3 days of careful negotiation at the Grand Pacific Hotel.
But also about the inspiring leadership.
An important stand from the Pacific nations, according to UN Special Envoy for Climate Change, Mary Robinson.
I think it is a strong statement from the countries of the region, the small island South Pacific states. And I believe that there was a very good, strong mood about adopting this resolution because it also had support from the civil society and from business. And people know the situation is very serious. I think it's important that this voice is heard in Paris.
That we shall overcome someday.
Nice piece of journalism. One of the tests, I think, in doing any kind of international journalism is being able to hit the ground running and being able to get background together very, very quickly and being able to put together a compelling story like this one. I've just actually come back from a climate change conference in Wellington and Te Papa, which is a very invigorating, stimulating experience. The sort of people that you meet in a conference like this is really quite something. The person that we saw just before the end of that program, Tony de Brom, from the Marshall Islands. He was the foreign minister and a great advocate around climate change issues. He unfortunately passed away just recently. I'm just going to show you a couple of brief little items, and then I'm going to tell you about the opportunities this year. Alistair Carter, she was in Fiji in 2014. And she covered the elections, first elections there after the coup in 2006. So it was a very groundbreaking time to sort of be there. But while she was there covering the elections, there was a whole group of Fijian soldiers, peacekeepers in the Middle East, in Syria, on the Golan Heights, who were unarmed and taken hostage. And so she covered this from Fiji as a combination of using social media, using the resources of the Fiji government, the material they got, and also her interviews. So I would like to show you this. The sound on that is a bit rough. She was working under incredibly difficult circumstances on a laptop with a software that wasn't working too well. But it's a very interesting sort of story.
The Fijian peacekeepers in Syria have finally been released. In this video on YouTube channel Talan, the men can be seen being welcomed and reaching safety. And at a press conference this morning, Prime Minister Voreqe Bainimarama says the soldiers are heroes.
These 45 men are heroes. They kept their cool and showed restraint under the most extreme circumstances imaginable.
In a video released online yesterday showing the 45 alive, Private Savenada Sewatambau Rambuka said the soldiers were happy to be coming home soon.
We've been informed that we will be released soon, and we are all very happy to be going home.
Brigadier General Mosese Tikoitonga says the soldiers were released across the Kenitra crossing point in Golan Heights last night at 11:50 p.m. Fiji time. He says they were all in high spirits.
We spoke to them. I spoke to Captain Rambuka straight after they came across. They were all in high spirits. Then we spoke to them again this morning, our time. They were in a grog ceremony after a welcoming service for them. We could hear the singing, drinking on the background, all the laughter, so they were all back to Fijian moods.
Brigadier General Tikoitonga says the soldiers were able to call their families in Fiji as soon as they had crossed. Bainimarama says he is sure the soldiers will return to their duties.
Our men will need to be debriefed, and they obviously deserve a period of rest before they return to their duties. But I know that they are all keen to continue their mission.
Alistair Carter for One Sawara.
But I'll just tell you a little bit about it as I'm running out of time. And this was an award-winning story, a series of stories in Fiji last year, Tukuraki's story of survival. And you can actually see this on the Pacific Media Centre's YouTube channel. But Julie Cleaver and Kendall Hutt, who did the Bearing Witness project in Fiji, won the DART Asia Pacific Award for Trauma Journalism. Basically telling a story of a group of villagers who survived a mudslide and 2 cyclones in a period of 4 years, and the people have been moved to another village. It's a really compelling piece of video, so I really recommend it to actually go and have a look at it on the YouTube channel. Now I just want to tell you about the opportunities for this year. So we do a project called Bearing Witness, which is 2 weeks in Fiji during the mid-semester break. It's a fairly full-on experience. And need to hit the deck running sort of thing. So we're looking at the dates of April 14th to 28th. And it's a climate change project. We've been doing that for 2 years now, and this is the 3rd year that we'll be doing it. And the people who do it will be staying at the University of the South Pacific campus, wonderful campus, very beautiful, and based around the PACE, which is the Pacific Centre for Environmental Research, and also the USP Journalism Program. So we'll be circulating. I've got some flyers sitting over there, just in front of you there. So what's your name? Right, great. There's a whole lot of flyers there that are about all these projects that I'm telling you about now. So the deadline is actually to apply for this is 4 o'clock on Friday. We fund the airfares and we fund the accommodation. We give a little bit of a koha for living expenses, but it's very cheap living in Fiji, but you would have to top up a little bit yourselves. The next project is the Pacific Media Watch project, where we pay someone for 10 hours a week for the whole year. This has been a very popular project over the last few years, and I mentioned a couple of people. Alistair Qatar, for example, is in Fiji. She did the project, and now she's a presenter and a key journalist on Tangata Pacifica. So it's a really good introduction in preparing yourself for a career. So that's 10 hours a week paid, and mainly reporting and editing on media freedom stories throughout the region, but it's quite a lot of general stories also get covered as part of the project. We also have a new project that started last year and will be running this year with the New Zealand Institute for Pacific Research, where we basically have somebody contracted to work with the Institute, doing a whole series of profiles and stories about some of the researchers from around the Pacific, a lot of really interesting stories, working very in close liaison with the Institute itself. The Pacific Media Centre runs that project, and you're actually paid from the school, but it's working very closely in liaison with the Institute itself. And we also got the Asia Pacific Report, which I should show you in the next slide here, I think, which is like Te Wānui. It's one of our publications in the journalism program. This one specialises in international journalism and the Asia Pacific region. Our largest single audience is New Zealand, but also we have big audiences in the Philippines and in Indonesia. And also in Australia and the US, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and so on. We run a lot of stories that no one else has. And it's a combination of both our journalism students' work, but also journalists all around the region and academics all around the region contributed. So your work is seen in relation to a lot of other work in the region. So you get quite a high readership. 20,000 is roughly about the figure we have at the moment. So that's basically that in a nutshell, and I think we've got time for just a few questions. We've got time.
David, what about the Samoan Observer?
Sorry?
Samoan Observer. Samoan Observer.
The Observer opportunity?
Oh, well, yes. Well, we haven't got anything sort of formal around that, but should we mention that as a possibility? Yes, the Samoa Observer has approached us. They want to have a basically, they're going to be offering an internship. So we should be able to announce that something fairly soon. So that will be a paid position with the Samoa Observer. For the last 3 years, we've had some of our students go over on internships there for a couple of years, not just with Observer alone, but all the Samoan media, and they've all had a fantastic time. It's a really tremendous experience. So watch the space. We will have some information about that a little bit later on, and that'll be for next year. That'll be something that appeals to anybody graduating. So we'll keep you posted on that. Look, I'll skip these. These are just, I think, a better background of some of the materials that we have, which we'll deal with in the course itself. But have we got time for a few questions? Anybody like to know a little bit more about these opportunities? As I say, we've got flyers over there, and I'll circulate it through Louise for everybody as well. But the deadlines for all these applications are 4 o'clock on Friday. Send to Jessie. What we need is your basically a covering letter saying why you want to do the particular project, which one you'd like to do, and a CV and a bit of profile about why you think that you'd be able to do this particular opportunity quite well. So any questions? I'm sure there must be a few burning questions. Anybody interested in applying for some of the...
I'm eligible. I always wanted to do our internship, actually. If you haven't got a question now, but later you think, what was that thing? Then come see me and I'll put you in touch with David, or I can probably answer some of your questions anyway.
Yeah.
But if it gets sort of complex, then I'll send you to David. But yeah.
And just to tell you too, because I'm hanging out in a slightly different place from the rest of the journalism team, I'm actually on the 10th floor. Pacific, you'll see the big signs, Pacific Media Centre. Come looking for me there, and I'll be happy to give you any background. Or
we did have one question down the back there.
Yep.
When is it taking place?
Sorry?
When are they taking place again?
Okay, so it depends which one you mean.
Yes. So basically, we've got the Bearing Witness project, which we actually have a course for that, International Journalism Project. So you can actually roll for that. It's 150 hours. Basically, it's intensive for the two weeks, but you also have some preparation work beforehand as part of the 150 hours, and then there's work afterwards, such as making videos and reflective articles and things like that. So that's the Bearing Witness Climate Change Project, and we'll be looking for 2 people to go on that. We like to send people in pairs, so you've got a bit of support for each other, because it's quite a challenging experience. So it's a lot more fun if you're actually with a buddy. Pacific Media Watch as a paid job all year. That's 10 hours a week, and that's negotiable when those hours. It's very flexible, and it's something that fits in really well with your studies. And it's a natural sort of follow-on. And then the other one is the New Zealand Institute for Pacific Research, which is also 10 hours a week, and that'll be based mainly over at Auckland University. That's where, but largely done from here. But they'll be liaising with the team over there, so it means they'll be going over to the Whale and meeting quite a number of the Pacific people. Most of the institute people that are involved in projects are actually based there. Although AUT is one of the partners, so it could be even academics on campus here and so on. You'll see that on the information notes there, I've got a link to stories that were done last year by the team who did it last year, Hilly and Brandon. Really good stories, so it's a good opportunity.
There are a lot of details in that, so grab a flyer. If that doesn't answer your questions, come and see me, because I appreciate which ones when is important, right? So we'll talk after it. All right?
Yep, great.
So look, the Pacific Media Centre, I just want to support David's co-up here. The Pacific Media Centre seriously makes AUT unique. AUT journalism is unique anyway, but it's doubly unique if you can be doubly unique because of the Pacific Media Centre and David's many years work over the years. Really, without him, I can talk about him because he's leaving. Without him, New Zealand would know so much less about the Pacific and Asia political sphere than we do. So you could be part of what is an incredibly important function, if you like, in the socio-political arena that we have here at AUT. And what David's done is just incredible. Is that a question?
If you do
how about we just introduce our names as we ask questions?
Grace, if you choose to take part in any of these things, not really the Pacific Media Centre, but the other exchanges, would you kind of get some slack in terms of other assignments? Because 150 hours seems a bit...
The 150 hours is 2 weeks in Fiji.
Okay, but what if you had assignments during that time?
Well, then you would negotiate with your lecturers, I guess, yeah.